back. We'll call this a volume 2 of NPO Stories Lab series. I am joined with our keynote speaker of the evening, Mr. soon-to-be Dr. Jaquial Durham, who is the founder of For the Love of Community. Yes, clap, 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 claps. Jaquial, tell us a little bit about your background in nonprofit and how this whole vision of these roundtable talks came about.
So, how did For the Love of Community came about? I had to go way back to middle school, actually. I was a part of Big Brother, Big Sister program, and my big brother was this gentleman by the name of Dr. Ramondo James, and he really introduced me to the work that he was doing. He was my big brother, and he worked for the Big Brother, Big Sister program, but he also had his separate organization aside from that he kind of just adopted me into. And I was really intrigued by the work that he was doing. And so in high school, we had to do a senior project. And that senior project for me, I went to Dr. Ramondo James and said, hey, I know that you do a lot of community work. I have this idea. And that idea didn't happen. But I remember one night, I have these weird late night sweet cravings. And this was when Sonic was where now Verizon Wireless is located. That's how old I am. But I remember going there one night, and it was 12 o'clock at night, and went there, and I remember being at the red light right there by the Sonic, and I was like, Thanksgiving. And so I actually decided to say, I told myself, I said, I'm gonna give out turkeys this year. And so from that moment, I kind of decided on, what I wanted to do and how I needed to do it. And I reached out to Miss Adrian and, got the location, and I gave out 30 turkeys. And she came to me afterwards and said, you got to do this again next year, right? And I said, I didn't think so. I thought this was just a one-time thing. But from that, For the Love of Community eventually came about and just blossomed over time. But I will say, I know a lot of people have been talking about, I'm not ashamed. God is really good. But, it was really me being in trouble. And at the time, I speak candidly, I was a young kid, an adolescent, and I was expelled all years of middle school. And being introduced to Dr. Ramondo James really changed my life. He really, truly put me in a position to really understand that mentorship that I needed. He gave me my first speaking engagement as part of my community service. And from that moment, he really supported me. And I think with my senior project, I had a supervisor who was over my senior project, Dr. Tawanda Davison, and I went to her and I said, hey, I got this idea, and I think I want to start a nonprofit. And she was like, okay, you want to start a nonprofit? Okay. And I was like, yeah, I want to start a nonprofit. And so I was in Upper Bound, and our Upper Bound trip, we went to Columbia, South Carolina, and that was my first time actually ever seeing tall buildings. And I said, man, this is what Columbia look like. I've only been to Clemson, and walking outside that hotel or that convention center, and I remember kind of going back into a session, and there was a lady by the name of Miss Cheryl Addison, and she was speaking, and she was talking about all the things that she was doing, and I went to her and I said, hey, I don't know exactly what you do, but I want to do that. I actually want to do that. And I remember her driving from Anderson every other week, meeting me at the Central Library. And I remember her literally telling me, write down mission and vision statements. And she made me write those mission and vision statements until it got to a point where she felt like it was good. And it was a very frustrating task because it was my first time actually having to write what I know now is a thesis. And I never had to, as a high school kid, I never had to write so much in very little, which is essentially what a mission and vision statement is. And so, ironically, I I was going through some old stuff the other day, and I actually found this composition notebook. We know what those are. We don't use those now, but I literally found my composition notebook, and it had literally my mission and vision statements from 2012, and I still have those things. And I read those, and I was like, wow, like I was really doing the thing. And so for me, it wasn't for the love of community then, but it will eventually be what will become for the love of community, honestly.
You just mentioned that you wrote your first mission and vision in 2012. I'm not the best at math, but that was about 12 years ago. How have those statements evolved over the years, or have they?
I would definitely say the mission and vision has somewhat changed. The ideas have never changed. The ideas of what I wanted to do are things that I'm currently or eventually will be doing. But when I think about, because I kind of remember the mission and vision, or the mission at least from then, essentially was about helping people, primarily young people, who was, at the time, my mission was around children who had incarcerated parents. For me, I had a father who was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And so my mission was around children who were dealing with incarcerated parents. And so that, in some sense, is something that I'm still grappling with and trying to figure out, okay, how do I actually get involved with children who have incarcerated parents? I lived in D.C. for 8.5 years, and I realized I was an educator, children, primarily boys who I knew had incarcerated parents, they got away with a little bit more, honestly. But I realized that I have a heart for kids who have incarcerated parents, mom or dads. But that was something that really, at that time, was something that I was really gravitated towards. But also children who were grandparent children. I'm a grandparent child, and so things are centered around primarily children. I can't say that that's where we are today as an organization. That's some place that I really want to go and get to. But I think because I'm so passionate about it that I kind of really want to like home run it, and I understand that that's not realistic all the time, but that's kind of one thing that gets in my way, is wanting to kind of do things the right way or not do it at all. But one of my quotes that I've read is that you're always going to be behind until you get into the race, and so that's one of the things that I've always really wanted to get around, was focusing on children who are grandparent children or children who have parents that are incarcerated.
Your organization, For the Love of Community, do you have different sectors that you focus on? Like, I know you mentioned mentorship. I don't know if you do any type of literacy or financial literacy program, or what are some of the sectors that the Community of Love consists of?
Yeah, so those are health, food, and nutrition, which falls underneath our annual turkey drive. Parks and recreations, which we're doing a sports exhibition right now that opens December the 12th. And that is a sports exhibition that is about 50 years, celebrating 50 years of desegregation of Daniel High School sports. So looking at, we're doing a sports exhibition that honors the black athletes who played at Daniel from 1964 to 2014. And our mission with that is to, that's kind of somewhat of a fundraising event, or somewhat of a fundraiser for us, but it is primarily focused on refurbishing all the parks in Clemson, South Carolina. Once we actually do that, because I really wanted to get into parks and recreations, and it kind of stemmed from me taking my kids to the park. Is kind of where it started, and then my daughter always like, Dad, I gotta go to the restroom, and I'm like, well, they don't got a restroom out here, and I'm like, well, we leave, we ain't coming back. And so I text Mayor Hairfaker and I said, hey, we got to do something about these parks. We need some restrooms. We need some stuff out here. And it's beautiful because I see that I finally put a pavilion out at one of the parks. But but it stemmed from the fact that I would go to these parks and take my kids to these parks, and there would be no restrooms and certain things that were lacking in terms of, at the time she was like 3 or 4, and the playground primarily fit 7th and 8-year-olds. And so I really thought that it would be good to really try to figure out how to really tailor these parks to not only fit young kids, but people who are disabled and able, elders, etc. And so I, wrote a proposal, and here we are. And I thought that the sports exhibition would tie into that, because not only would it help with refurbishing the parks, but it also educates kids about, the culture of this community, which is the high school around here and high school sports. And ironically, it fell underneath the 50-year celebration of the Civil Rights Act. But aside from that, health, food, nutrition, parks and recreation, incarceration. Karen and I we've had several meetings about trying to figure out how to transport people to see their loved ones that are incarcerated. The thing with that is that, from my experience, we didn't have the best car, and we had to stop a few times to put water in it because it ran hot, and you didn't have money for gas. My father at the time was incarcerated at Lieber Correctional Institution, which is almost maybe right outside of Summerville, South Carolina. And to be honest with you, we didn't go no further than Seneca and Greenville, let alone about to go all the way past Columbia. We not going there. And I went 5 years without seeing my father. And because of that, not only that, but you're traveling all these hours to spend 2 hours with somebody. So you're spending more time on the road than you are actually visiting him. It just logistically didn't make sense. But that was actually the mission of the nonprofit when I first started, was to actually, my senior project, I wanted to take a charter bus and charter people down to see their loved one. I think I might have talked to Don about it, actually. But it was literally trying to get people to help people to see their loved ones that are incarcerated, because it's just unaffordable. And it just, for some people, don't make sense for them, especially because South Carolina is such a big little state. You can spend a lot of time on the road and not even know it. And but I've also had a lot of formerly incarcerated people who asked me to do their resumes. And I'm like, man, I don't do my own resumes. But I've actually sat down with some people who were literally just released from prison and was doing their resumes. And so even something that kind of falls within that. And the fourth thing, what is the fourth thing? So it's food insecurity, prison work, and parks and recreation, and entrepreneurship. And what we do with entrepreneurship is that we only done it a couple of times, but I loved it because I now get to see one of my high school students have a fashion brand that I'm like, man, I might have to buy some of that. But we actually had a youth business expo, and our first time we had it at Yoga Therapy Bar, and which is a black-owned therapy bar downtown Clemson, probably the only black-owned business downtown Clemson. And we, just highlighted black businesses in the area. But our mission, the second time we did it, was I said, hey, man, I want to actually get in contact with these kids, because when I was in high school, I started a fashion brand, and I really wanted to help young kids understand, and just understanding youth, is that a lot of kids, it's somewhat kind of easy to be an entrepreneur, because these kids have all access to this social media, etc. And so even if they're not going to college, they can have some type of understanding of logistics of business. The same way nonprofit requires certain paperwork, the same thing requires for entrepreneurship. And so we actually kind of adopted 5 kids from Daniel High School. One young lady had a candle business. One guy had a vision for a fashion brand, it didn't have anything at all. There was another young lady who wanted to be a photographer. And there was 2 other kids who had other businesses as well. But we had a huge business expo at the Little John Community Center. And that young kid, I was a little jealous because he made $600 in one day. And it was beautiful because he literally saw his brand grow, and we had all their logos created. We actually had a really dope fashion designer who's done album covers for Cardi B, They really was tapped in with a really big prominent graphic artist, and he did all their logos on the house. And he was like, yo, I really love what these kids are thinking. Like, I love the fact that and we had a whole Zoom call, and he was like, yo, I really love the fact that y'all are like 11th and 12th graders and giving me more of a challenge than people who come to me who have large budgets. And so, they had their business cards, they had their logos all recreated, JPEG, PNG files. I gave them everything that they needed to continue on. And so now I see this young kid on social media, and I'm like, bro, I'm hating a little bit on your brand, yo, like, cause I like where you're going with it. And so now, like, it's beautiful because I sent it in a group chat. I'm like, yo, like, we really helped this kid start a fashion brand, but I literally took him to the manufacturer, like to the production company, and I literally took him there, and he watched his stuff get produced. And I was like, man, and I saw in his eye, like, yeah, he really wanted, like, he don't want to tell me, but I know he's really happy right now. And so that was really beautiful. So entrepreneurship, because for me, a lot of things that we do as an organization in some capacity, all four of those pillars, I have a story I can tell you about all four of those things as to why I really wanted to focus on the things, because in some capacity, those things helped me get to where I'm at.
Yes, very good. I mean, I feel like there's so many things to dissect, but for the sake of time, I'll be cognizant of everyone's time. Tell us, Jaquial, how can we stay in contact with you? How can you reach and extend support from your community? How can they connect with you to further support your missions and your mission and vision for the love of community?
Yeah. So for the most part, most people know how to get in contact with me, but For the Love of Community is all of our social handles. But before I finish, I want to, Don Peppers, Miss Karen, Miss Adrian, those three people. Miss Karen always remind me of why I do what I do, because she always asks about my grandmother. And honestly speaking, I don't know how much longer I'm gonna have my grandmother as a grandmother kid, to be honest and transparent. But she we used to go to the Clemson Community Care all the time. Like, that was, and it really inspired me, because in so many ways I really realized, like, it really inspired me as to why I do the work that I do, because I know what it's like to grow up having to go to the Clemson Community Care, and as a child you kind of feel like, damn, like we don't got nothing, like, we have the Clemson Community Care, but as an adult, I look at it differently. And Miss Adrian just, again, you're gonna have to do this again next year, but just in so many ways, just continuously being of support and just educating me even when I don't ask for it. And Don just, he's like the OG. Like, so many of us came under Camp Proverbs in some capacity, but even the Upper Bound and the summer programs that we would spend together for those summers, just me kind of just soaking up all those things. And so that's why I kind of like For the Love of Community is what it is, because I feel like it was a community of people that really truly kind of groomed me. It wasn't just a village of people. And so I always feel like if we just do what we do for the love of the people and for the community, kind of everyone essentially summed it up in so many ways, in so many different ways, why we need to do the things that we do. But it essentially, to me, is all about for the love of the community of people, because for me, without a community that showed me love, I wouldn't be where I'm at. We wouldn't be able to introduce me, as soon to be Dr. Jaquial if it wasn't for these people in this room, and so many others who, since I've been back home, had an opportunity to just, like, I ran into Dr. Ramondo James at Ingles one day, and we talked for like hours, and I was just like, man, like, this guy really, truly inspired me and truly groomed me and made me go and speak in front of people as part of my. He was like, you're not just, we're not going to sign off anything, because honestly, I was on probation in the middle school. But he was like, I'm not just signing up. You're going to go, we're going to speak, you're going to learn how to talk, you're going to learn all these things. He really, truly, like, I'm like, man. So, For the Love of Community, to answer your question, For the Love of Community is how most people can reach them. But I did want to kind of plug that in, because these people are here, and I never really kind of share that out loud. But I want to make sure that I say that out loud, because them people, some capacity, indirectly, directly, is a part of why, this is even happening today for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, soon to be Dr. Jaquial Durham.